are back with something new. I am one of your hosts, Amber Solaris, and welcome to the first ever season of Reign of Pain, where we dive into the edges of desire, thrill of endurance, with the art of sadomasochism and pain-related play. So, this is your space to explore, educate, power. Whether you're a seasoned player or you're just beginning your journey into this form of play. So pain play isn't just about sensation, it's about that sense of trust and connection and really transformation. Every episode here will shed light on different techniques, different explorations, journey. Of course, we'll talk about the safety stuff and the inner worlds of people who embrace the sting, the thud, and the different sensations while they surrender to seeing stars. So step into the night and embrace the unknown and find your own version of the Reign of Pain. And of course, as always, a little bit of a content warning. This is listener discretion advised. There is a content warning for potentially distressing topics. We will be discussing a multitude of adult-only topics here, and so you are encouraged to consider your own capacity before continuing. Welcome back, listeners, and you are getting what is probably your first episode with me hosting for this particular season for the Reign of Pain in particular. So today with me is someone I have been trying to pin down for quite a while and have had the biggest brain crush on for forever. In with me today in my black and red dungeon is Vahavta.
Hello!
So, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself just a little bit for listeners who may not be familiar?
Sure. Well, hi. Yeah, I'm Vahavta, and I write and teach and make stuff when it comes to kink, largely for bottoming education on the edge. But I talk about all sorts of topics. I talk a lot about riskier play and styles of play that maybe are not so commonplace even among us weirdos. And yeah, I'm not sure what more to say on that.
And we are a huge fan of Vahavta over at the ROB and ROP team. We absolutely love having your classes on our platform. I think we've had 2 classes now, both your fear play class and your risk profile class, which have both been very much heavily asked for by our audiences. And now we are looking at having 2 more classes for Reign of Pain coming up this February. So super incredibly excited for those. I know. I like
Y'all are
two-
getting the whole collection here.
Oh yes, no, yeah, it's like we should get like I feel like we should get frequent flyer like little check mark things like collection, Vahavta collection here. We should have like I don't know. I feel like we should have the Vahavta collection should like mark them off or something. You know, have like an award or something. Yeah, no, this should be a thing. This should be a thing. No, listeners, I will not be providing any sort of a thing for my classes similar because unlike any average reasonable presenter, there is no way you could attend all of my classes.
That seems like a challenge.
Oh, it's bad, Vahavta. It's bad. My present class list is over 50 pages long.
Oh man, that's an accomplishment. I feel like people should try to collect them all just to say they did. Wow.
It's like a fucking Pokemon ball thing. There's right now on my recording list, there's over 100 recordings on my
Wow, you're
yeah.
prolific.
Or insane. Or
Or
both.
insane. Or
Both.
both.
Both. Both is good. Both.
Both is good.
Um, but with Bahavta, we can keep that like nice little collector card. And then have like little stars on it. I feel like that would be nice. Um, anyways, so this particular episode is going to be all about the Bahavta. We've read lots of your writings. I've read lots of your writings. I may or may not have been stalking your profile and your writings and the risk evaluation database for a significantly lengthy period of time that shall remain undisclosed. Uh, hey, it's a parasocial relationship, not directly stalking. You have no reason to be or feel in danger. Therefore, it's parasocial relationship.
I almost never feel in danger. That's one of the biggest criticisms. So we're good.
See, now that would be yeah. We'll think about that. We'll come back to that one.
Sure.
We'll come back to that one. But also, I just love your resources. They're also fantastic. So, but what I really wanted to chat about today was how you got into where you are in kink. You're obviously fantastically brilliant, but you obviously didn't get to where you are today, springing fully formed. So, what kind of brought you to where you are now? What was the start of your journey kind of like?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say that I hope to never be fully formed. That I don't ever want to be that. And also like I'm always surprised when people say such nice things, which by the way, thank you. But I feel like I'm just bopping about doing my thing, like I'm everybody else. And I love learning from people and talking to people. And that's kind of how the whole community thing started for me. Kink was something that I was always interested in, pretty much like my earliest memories of what I wanted for a relationship were like I watched Silence of the Lambs and like had an awakening, which is, I think, not what you're supposed to do, but that's what I did. And pretty much as soon as I could get involved in any kind of a community, I did. And actually, my first FetLife account was the username was This Is a Butt, and it had only pictures of my butt, which, yeah, I maintained was hilarious, but eventually decided I needed to represent more of myself. It is a very good butt, though. Um,
It is a very nice.
and I was in the Midwest at the time. I was going back and forth between there and the East Coast, where I am now. And I started talking to people, meeting people, and then pretty early on, actually, in North Carolina, I got a message from somebody about my favorite author who I had been talking about on my profile. And now we're married, and I wear his collar. And yeah, but there's steps in between that, I guess. Um, how I started making stuff is really just that I got asked to because it was a fluke. I posted some pictures with big bruises that people liked, and I had somebody ask if I would teach a class on masochism. And at that time, I thought I had a fairly low pain tolerance. But I was like, well, I like the thinky thoughts. I do a lot of research. I do a lot of pontificating, so I probably can put something together. And I did. And so the first class that I ever taught was Make Me a Masochist, Changing Your Relationship with Pain, which is one of the ones I'm doing for Reign of Pain. So that was the first class I ever taught. I taught in person. I had a blast. I was a little nervous. I remember standing in front of everyone with my notes and like the notes shaking a little bit and hoping that nobody noticed.
Oh,
Um,
that's adorable.
yeah, and I like my printer had screwed up, so I felt like it was the end of the world and everything was going to be a disaster. But it was not a disaster. And from there, I just kind of kept writing things down because I was here's where it gets spicy. I entered knowing that I wanted to be in something that was CNC, consensual non-consent. I didn't want a safe word. I wanted to give over control to a partner who I trusted it with and really experience like the full range of what a human can experience. And
Mhm.
I was very quickly told, you can't do that. You have to have a safe word. You have to, good safe kink is bottom has control of the scene, really. And what happened when people said that to me wasn't that I thought, oh, okay, I'll just revise what I want. It just meant that I didn't have resources. And so
Right.
over time, my goal kind of became like, I want to create the resources for people who come in feeling like I do, and who are being told, nope, like there is absolutely no way to do that. You're wrong if that's what you want to do. You're playing unsafely. Um, because telling people that doesn't stop them. And I do think that there are ways that we can mitigate risks. I don't think any kink is safe, but there are ways that we can make things safer. And so over time, that became the goal with the writings, and more classes came out of that on CNC and on risk management in general. And then um, the last thing, and then I'll shut up for a second, uh, is that I came across a writing about a horrific experience that somebody had. I'm putting an asterisk on this because there's going to be a but here. But somebody had with a waterboarding scene gone wrong and the fallout of that and the things that they were experiencing after the fact that were 1 in a million chances, but when they happen to you, when you're that 1 in a million, that
Mhm.
suddenly doesn't matter as much. And they were things that like nobody had ever told me could be a risk. And people were commenting on this writing saying, like, yeah, this is the kind of thing that nobody talks about because we all know it's possible, but none of us had ever heard of it actually happening. So it didn't seem relevant. And I thought, well, that doesn't actually mean it's not relevant whatsoever. Now, the caveat here is that that particular writing ended up being a hoax. However, the effects that were talked about are ones that are possible. So, what came out of that is RED, the Risk Evaluation Database, which has been my attempt to curate risks for some popular types of play from the very, very common to the very, very rare. Not to discourage people from doing things, but because I believe that in order to consent to something, you need to be as fully informed as possible, and that includes those 1 in a million chances. So that's been the journey. I don't know if I covered what you wanted me to, but
Oh,
that's where I'm at
absolutely.
right now.
Absolutely. And the risk evaluation database, when I found it, was like gold for me. Just knowing that people, one, thought similarly and to how I do. Um, I, for one, and have been very open about the fact that I have an obsessive compulsive disorder that centers around, for one, safety uh, and scrupulosity amongst others, which I know based on the dumb shit that I do, people would go, "The fuck, Ember? How do you manage that?" I'm like, "Well, if you've ever been to any of my classes and you've ever gone through any sort of like negotiation or a scene planning situation with me, you will very clearly see it because that is exactly like I am meticulous about that. So the risk evaluation database made my heart so fucking happy. Um,
Good.
so happy. Um, immensely happy. It's just having the conversation about it around in our communities about things such as reducing risk. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
another thing, I grew up very heavily religious, and I think many of us grew up in, for instance, abstinence only sex education, with the
Hmm.
idea that if any of us, something's dangerous, we don't teach them about it, they don't do it. And
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think all of us know exactly how goddamn effective that was. Because you're never going to actually stop people from doing something. You're only going to prevent them from doing it with informed consent and with safer, more risk mitigated practices. So I think there has been, in large part, due to a lot of your classes and the risk evaluation database, a shift in conversation with risk profiling and risk mitigation procedures to say, you know what, we really need to focus and shift this perspective from no, you can't do that, that's dangerous, to how are we going to reduce and mitigate this risk if someone is going to make the informed choice to do it anyways.
And I have never actually connected that before to the prevalence of abstinence only education, but I think you're spot on about that. And it's kind of amazing thinking about that and thinking about the people who have tried to tell me you shouldn't talk about these things where newbies can see, who are like largely good people and people who I know are anti abstinence only education. But these things can be so pervasive in culture and in upbringings that, yeah, I have never considered it that way before, but I think you're exactly right that that's where a lot of that comes from. And yeah, it helps nobody.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're never going to stop people from doing it. You're never
Hmm.
going to, like, I mean, for example, content warning, mentioning of scalpels and artistic cutting. Um, my artistic cutting classes. Are you ever going to stop people from cutting their own skin with something? It's not going to happen. What I can do is I can transform and help people have a more useful, beneficial, and pleasant relationship with that, and also reduce the risks associated with it by having information and empowerment behind that, and technique. So having community, having connection, and things like that, having people who accept and surrounded with isolation does nothing to help anyone. So just having people who accept, I mean, when you're forced to, and you're isolated and you're doing something in isolation because now you can't do it and now you have to hide it, you're in that much more danger with this shit. So having community and having the benefit of that is that much more critical. So I think that what you have put together and the movement that your group has, if not started, deeply contributed to, has been incredibly meaningful for not just edge players, but kink in general.
It is a community effort. It's really a beautiful thing that I am frequently getting messages from people who just want to share what they went through so that I can put it in the database and other people can be protected. And while I wish that nobody ever had to go through negative consequences, I think there's something really beautiful in all of us working to protect each other and help other people be more informed. And like, I don't know, that's kind of what I think community is there for. And something that I didn't mention in my little intro story there, I realized, is that I'm disabled. But I didn't know I was disabled when I entered kink. That's kind of been a process as well, and has developed and changed over time. And it really was being part of community groups online that helped me figure out what was going on with my body and what I needed to be talking to doctors about and what sorts of things I would want to try or not try. And so that kind of community support, I think, has been a huge part of inspiring what I want to do over with kink, because we got to lean on each other in the world the way it is. We got to rely on what we can provide each other because no one else is going to do it for us.
I think that's beautiful. Absolutely love that sentiment altogether. You know, as much as the kink community or subculture altogether has its issues, I think having having social support there, I mean, social scientist here speaking. The social scientist in me goes, well, social support is the number one predictor of beneficial outcomes. Um, but it really is true. The social support aspect within kink really does provide that supportive, cushioning aspect to so many things that we do. And not just with our dynamics, but with the friendships, even online. I mean, same thing here, even with health and empowerment. And I think that is, you know, such a beautiful thing. And that is, again, a large part of why we do things with the Rain of Blood and Let It Rain team here. So, you know, we really appreciate all the work that you do with that. It's a fantastic thing to see. It's gives me all the lovely feels.
We like the lovely feels.
So, tell me a little bit more about how you came to understand your own identity and role within kink. Um, you said you weren't quite sure. You said you were had thought you had a lower pain tolerance, for
Yeah.
instance. What was that journey like for you?
I mean that so imposter syndrome, I mean, very real and very real within kink also. And so I was getting big bruises, and I still kind of feel this way, that like that was not a fantastic metric for people to use to determine that would have things to say about masochism. I did have things to say, but some of them were along the lines of, hey, I keep getting messages from people asking how to get bigger bruises. And that isn't something I can teach you because that has so much to do with individual body chemistry and hormones and what you eat and what prescriptions you might take, and so much that doesn't have to do with what is happening in play at all.
Mhm,
And somebody who is at a dungeon screaming really loudly, like, you don't actually know how hard they're playing. That's just the way they're processing whatever they're experiencing.
mhm,
But so the way that worked for me is that I thought I was not living up to what it took to be called a masochist or whatever until people started asking for my advice. And I still kind of feel like, why are you asking me? I don't know. But I did get a firmer footing in that after a little bit, that like, okay, I do enjoy this quite a bit. There are wires crossed in my brain, and this brings me pleasure. And on the power exchange level, um, I guess submissive was really the only word I used at first. And I still kind of think that role words in general are, they're wobbly. We
Mm.
define them in different ways. Um, it was a few years into my dynamic before we started doing anything that was on like the caregiver little spectrum, but we added that at some point. And as things evolved, where we are now, and I think the role that I identify with the most is as property and my owner. And we use interchangeable words, but the reason that role has worked for me, I think, is because I do submit, like that's a factor of the relationship, but I want who I am and how I move through the world, and how I relate to him to be something where like it's not always me submitting to him, but I'm always his property. And
Mhm.
I'm representing, what he cares for. And on the other side of things, like that makes it his responsibility to take care of me and not put me on a dusty old shelf. And so property is the role more than anything else, but I certainly am a masochist and edge player and whatever I am in any given moment. It shifts.
Lovely. Yeah, I totally understand that. It works very much the same way for me. I very much shift the words that I would use to describe my identity or roles depending on the relationships that I'm in or at any given time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't
we
quite call
evolve.
this very much so. We very much evolve, and relationships evolve. Uh,
Hmm.
very much evolve. So you talked a little bit about the imposter syndrome based thing for you. Could you talk a little bit more about that? I think that is something that a lot of pain givers and pain receivers, especially, experience.
Yeah, so imposter syndrome, as far as kink and specifically pain goes, for me has taken the form of, am I giving enough? And sometimes that's, am I taking enough? Is the scene going as intensely as my partner wants? And then also, am I giving the reactions that my partner wants? And it took me a while to really fully wrap my hand around the idea that whatever responses I give are the right ones, and that the only wrong one is one that is not honest and authentic. Because I was raised on Tumblr. I was a child of Tumblr, and I came in with a very romanticized picture of what DS was and what SM was, and thought if I wasn't a smart ass masochist, or if I wasn't giggling and smiling the whole time, then I wasn't providing, whatever. Or on the other side, if I was smiling, then would a sadist still want to play with me if I'm not obviously in pain? And so there was a lot of judgment for me as to like my own reactions before I was able to say, hey, like this isn't about any kind of line you have to be higher than to ride. It's about having authentic experiences between two or more people. Um, or, there's solo stuff too. Sometimes it's just about having an authentic experience in general and
Mhm.
getting out of my own head and mind towards comparison of like, well, what are other people doing who look like me and are in my environment? Do I measure up? Will there be somebody who is more enjoyable to play with than I am? And ideas that, like, when I say them out loud, they sound ridiculous to me. And yet I know that when I am feeling them, and sometimes I do still feel them, it feels very all-encompassing and serious that there's something inherently not right about my reactions. And since you mentioned the, like, abstinence education thing, abstinence-only education was not part of how I grew up, but there was a very, like, clear picture as to what a relationship looked like, just,
Mhm.
the heteronormative, sort of ideal. And so I'm thinking maybe a lot of my, like, even in kink imposter syndrome has to do with, well, kind of the male gaze as somebody who is female and I'm with a man, I'm queer, but I am in a straight passing relationship. I think maybe a lot of my imposter syndrome has come from ingrained ideas of like, you gotta be demure. So cute, so demure.
Yep.
Um, and that there is a right way to feel and act and present yourself. And that's just not
Mhm.
true. But the brain likes to compare us to other people and say, if I'm not acting like that, I am not as fun or as cool or whatever it might be.
I love sexual script theory for this one. Sorry, I'm going psychologist again.
Please
Uh,
do.
I love. Are you familiar with sexual script theory?
No, not by that name at least.
So, sexual script theory says that we have basically these stories written out in our mind um, from our socialization of how sexuality in romantic relationships or their sexual relationships are quote supposed to go, and that when we defer or kind of go against or away from that, it can cause issues with arousal or it can cause anxiety. And the further off that we go from that and distance ourselves from that sexual script, the more tension that we feel from
Mm,
ourselves. And so, no, I very much have felt the same thing. Again, I was very much pushed to be heterosexual. I'm very queer. Very much pushed to be very hetero romantic. So acknowledging that I can and have can make space to not be hetero romantic at some point has been difficult to move against that script because, and it is what it is. Um, I try not to judge it for myself, but acknowledging these sexual scripts and sometimes playing with them, it can be fun, but they exist.
yeah, yeah,
For what they are. They're a product of our society and socialization.
yeah, yeah. And that is something that really exists in kink too. And in some ways, I think we do ourselves a disservice by having role titles at all, as
Yep.
opposed to just like you can build your identity and your relationships and your connections however you want. And I think that's one of the things I end up saying to people when they ask me questions or I'm teaching most frequently is people will ask me, can I do XYZ? Can I have a CNC relationship but still be fully polyamorous? Can I, you know, be monogamous but still do non-sexual play? Like things like that. And my answers are always like, you can do whatever you want as long as everybody is a consenting adult. Yes, you can build this however you want, but it is so hard to break away from the ideas we were raised with and that we still see societally as to how things should be.
Yeah.
It's hard, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, it is. The two tools I really like working with on that one, again, is the sexual script theory, and
Mhm.
then also the sexuality. So the sexuality model is also really cute for that, and it's literally a tree, but it goes through and helps you look at how you experience sexuality and different levels of your life from a cultural, a relational, and an intimate standpoint, and how different elements of that affect the way that you see things. It's a really great model to look at. But anyways, I'm getting too sciencey. Nerd brain turn off.
I mean, that's me too. I think that we have very similar brains. I mean, I show up to classes and I'm like, let's operationalize definitions. And that's like the most exciting
Bingo.
thing to me. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, guilty as charged, can and have. Like, I don't know what you fucking mean. Where's the
Hmm.
operational definition?
Right. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, have done. We'll continue to do. Um, so no, it very much is that, and going against that, one, I think it is an act of reclamation. I think it also is an act of autonomy and rebellion in a certain way. Because I also hear people, you know, doesn't that make you a bad feminist? You like
Yeah. Oh,
getting
yeah.
you like getting beaten by a man. Like, well, yeah, I'm really queer, but I am also married to a well, at least cis male presenting. Cis is questionable, but that's neither here nor there. But someone who presents as a man. Um, but doesn't that make you a bad feminist? Well, in my book, going against those scripts and going against these scripts in a deep way of personal rebellion and taking it back for myself is an ultimate act of feminism.
Absolutely. And I definitely have struggled with that too. And I still get those questions sometimes as well that, like, yeah, somebody who is a feminist, somebody who, you know, is vocal about autonomy and independence, how can you do that when you have given over full control? And for me, the answer is because I have given over that control. It's gotten to be my choice. And
Right.
so when I've had people be critical and say, oh, like, if you're in a relationship where you don't have a word that 100% ends the scene, which, first of all, I think when they tell me that, they think I'm not communicating when I have problems, which I still am. I just don't have a big red stop button of my own. But people will say, you're being abused if you don't have that. And I say, but this was my choice. I came in and asked for it. How is it abusive for me to be doing something that I wanted and that I brought up? So
And
yeah, I think that
you're also assuming that this person is going to be pushing me toward these horrible things.
right. Yeah.
Like you're making assumptions here that yeah, friend.
Yeah, like what if he wants to cut off your arm? Well, we have other problems if that's the case because like he loves me and wants me to exist where he does. So like we're not doing things that are going to put me at risk in that way. But people panic, and I get it, it's protective. Um, but yeah, the idea that from the top or from the bottom, we get to build things that fulfill our desires. I mean, I think that's what feminism is. If
Oh
nothing
yeah.
else,
Mhm.
we get to live our desires. We get to pursue happiness, whatever that
And
looks like.
going against the inherent socialized scripts that we were given based on our gender assigned at birth. That is
Hmm.
inherently the definition of feminism,
Yeah.
for anyone, whether or not you were assigned female or male at birth.
Yeah.
So I think that is something for people to really consider, no matter whoever what. I mean, it's very empowering. Um, and for the record, I also don't really particularly use safe words. Quote, I use plain language communication. Ta-da!
Yeah. Yeah, and
Um,
there's nothing wrong with safe words if that's what works for people. And in some cases, like that's going to be the better option if clear verbal communication in the moment isn't something that is effective for you
for
or
you.
easy to access, like by all means use other
You
tools.
do you, friend. Whatever works for
Right,
you. It just
right.
does not work for me and my play partners in those minutes because while I might ask them, like, what are you at in a color system? Is that a yellow? Is that a red? Is that a where are we at? Or I will ask them what a number intensity we're at. Uh, mm, it's very hard for them to sit there and think of a word to try to quote unquote stop me in the middle of a situation. We're going to be communicating
Hmm.
long, 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 long before then. Because if we get to the point where they feel like they have to do that, to me, we've not communicated enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, like because that communication is so key to how I play, like there's never been a time, well, there was one time and it was a panic response, but there's never been a time where I've actually been like in danger because yeah, we communicate that before it ever gets there. There was one single time I can think of where I was like, this has to end now. And it was because I was just like scared and it was fine. Um, but people are often shocked when I say that, like, there haven't really been cases where I wanted to end a scene and it didn't end because I don't know, they think that's just a given. But yeah, you're spot on. If it gets to that point, I haven't been listened to or I haven't been making my partner aware of what's going on with me.
Right.
And so, yeah, we don't even get there.
No, no, I don't get anywhere near that. Like I heard someone say safe words are like bringing a some sort of a fire extinguisher into a kitchen to cook with. Like, all right, would it possibly be a really good thing to have in case of a random ass emergency? Yeah, but hopefully we're not going to be setting things on fire. Um,
Yeah.
um,
Let's never get there. Let's have it, but not have to use it. That kind
right.
of thing.
And
Yeah.
would I discourage brand new newbies playing on their own from having that? Absolutely fucking not. But in the type and intensity of play that I'm doing, the consistent communication, the almost constant stream of communication from like one possible thing going a hair's breadth wrong is critical. Like, so no, having a almost role play style thing where then we like break character by using a safe word to break a scene kind of, it does not work because at that point things are already too far gone
Hmm. Yeah.
for me. Like no, I can't do that. Um and by that point I can't trust that my bottom will already have, because they're going to hesitate, usually speaking, because they're not going to want to stop. They're
Yeah.
going to want to keep going. They're going to want to get like as much as I deeply encourage them at any point in time, we are going to end this at any point in time with no penalty should we need to, because we do some we do some shit.
Yeah.
Um we do some shit. Uh like, hey, we can step out of this at any point in time. Total autonomy here because we don't quite have that kind of a relationship. We don't live together, we don't have romantic relationships. uh, we are friends who beat one another up, right?
Yeah.
and and
Love that.
Yeah, we are friends who beat one another up, stab one another, and drown each other in their blood. So that's how that, the best kind of friends, right?
I mean, I
Uh,
think there's deep caring in like what we
oh,
do here.
immensely,
Yeah.
immensely. I absolutely love my play partners, and deeply care about their well-being. I don't have I want to push them in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I'd say clear, cut, and dry. You have a second thought, you let me fucking know, and we are out of this. Because I ain't risking it here, friend. This is too risky, too risky. So, as much as I do that, I still know they want to please me. I still know at its core, they do want to please me and they still want to accomplish it themselves. Um, I know my play partners. I know these people. I know they want to get to this accomplishment. They want to go through these things too. And, you know, I also know that they're going to have some emotional experiences if they have to call, quote, red. So I rather deal with the communication on up and avoid the whole thing and try to keep it nice and smooth by just using plain language communication. It's not that scary, people. I promise.
And I think that's part of the script too, and how we're socialized. Also, that communication, whether people were socialized male, female, or neither, like we have all these ideas that we are given about things that should and shouldn't be communicated,
Mhm.
and like how we process certain emotions. And for me, I want to communicate everything. Um, I want to be able to share things, whether they make me, you know, they might embarrass me, they might feel gross, they might feel sad, but it's still who I am authentically.
Yeah,
And yeah, and that's how I help my top keep me safe is by giving as much information as I can. Got to give all the data,
is beautiful. Is beautiful. I absolutely love that. All the data. Please
all the data.
tell me all the data. I love all the data. Um, as a top or as a bottom, I love all of the data. It's fantastic personally. And so I wish sometimes when people hear that, because I can see the shock value in people coming in. I wish people would just sometimes listen and take the time, like, no, whatever you're thinking in your head, it's not that. Just listen,
Mhm.
okay? Listen. I promise. Ah, I love humans. I promise. I really obviously, because I spent so much time start researching them. Um, fascinating creatures.
That we are.
Oh, so beautiful. So many big, wide experiences. So, well, you do have an upcoming big announcement. Would you like
I
to hint at
do.
that a little bit?
Yeah. So, um, towards the beginning of this year, I threw some stuff together up on Etsy that became a workbook. And it is so it's called Submission Beyond Limits, and it is meant for anyone who is an S type, right side of the slash. And it's a bunch of guided activities and forms to fill out and journal prompts and things that are meant to help people establish what they want out of a power exchange, to work on putting it into words in various forms so that you can do this kind of communication, learning to set boundaries, learning to determine what parts of a relationship matter to you most, figuring out how to communicate different things that are in your body awareness, what you're feeling at any given moment. And while it is geared towards S types, I have heard now from several D types who have found that it's helped them better define what they want in relationships. Anyway, all this time it has been this thing on Etsy that you can download and you can print out if you want. But I hadn't ever had a physical version of it, largely because I have extremely high standards. And I wanted to make sure if I was going to print it, that it was going to look nice and be nice to write on. And I have found a way to do that. And so by the end of the year, and hopefully a little bit before, there will be a way to get physical copies of the workbook that people can get for themselves or give to their friends or their partners or whoever and say, hey, I want more data, fill this out and learn stuff about yourself and put stuff into words and put it on paper. And then we can use that to make better scenes and relationships and fulfill people more. So yeah, I just got a proof of it. So it's not the full thing, but something I can hold in my hands because I wanted to make sure you could write on it properly. So I'm very, very excited to finish formatting that and get that up and out into the world. And it's scary also, but it's pretty cool. And I'm very excited to see what happens with that and what people do with it. And hopefully I can spread the idea of it makes you an empowered bottom or just part of a relationship to communicate more stuff about yourself. That's the goal. So that's the announcement. Very, very excited.
Absolutely love it. That's going to be fantastic. I I will keep that on the keep that in mind for holiday gifts. That should be fantastic on things. Well, thank you so much, folks, for joining in today, and we look forward to hearing more from Vahavta and having you back in our lovely classes for the rest of the holiday season. And lots of love from me in the Black and Red dungeon, not the South
Yay!
African dungeon. And we will
Thank you
see you
so
later.
much. Thank you, everyone, for listening too. I love that people will listen to me ramble. That's wild. So thank you for having me, and thank you to anyone who is listening as well.
Thank you, and we'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. Bye.